Throughout history, maps have been a gateway to understanding the world, visually representing geopolitical realities. Yet in the northwest corner of Africa lies a peculiar blank space, Western Sahara. Whether showcasing GDP per capita, population density, or access to resources, maps consistently leave this region as a void, marked simply as no data. This void symbolizes not just the lack of statistics, but the profound uncertainty that defines Western Sahara, a land embroiled in territorial disputes, geopolitical rivalries, and resource battles. Despite being nearly the size of the United Kingdom, Western Sahara is not recognized as an independent state by the United Nations. Its status as the last African colony epitomizes the unfinished business of decolonization. The region's geostrategic importance, lying at the crossroads of Europe, Africa, and the Atlantic, adds further complexity to its volatile history. Western Sahara's story is not just about maps and borders. It is a narrative of resistance, resource exploitation, and global politics. This video delves into the historical, political, and economic dimensions of Western Sahara, exploring its importance on the world stage and the intricate web of alliances, conflicts, and aspirations that shape its future. From the legacy of Spanish colonization to the ongoing power struggle between Morocco and the Polisario Front, this narrative reveals the hidden dynamics of a region that rarely makes global headlines, but holds immense significance. Western Sahara's modern struggle began with the Berlin Conference of 1884, where European powers divided Africa into colonies. Spain claimed the coastal desert, naming it Spanish Sahara, while neighboring Morocco and Algeria were claimed by France. For nearly a century, Spanish Sahara remained under Spanish control, isolated from the political changes sweeping across Africa. The mid-20th century brought a wave of decolonization. Morocco gained independence in 1956 and immediately set its sights on Spanish Sahara, arguing historical ties to the region. Tensions escalated after Algeria's independence in 1962, with Morocco laying claims to Algerian territories as well. This culminated in the Sand War of 1963, leaving relations between Algeria and Morocco strained. In 1975, as Spain's dictator Francisco Franco lay on his deathbed, Morocco seized the opportunity. King Hassan II launched the Green March, mobilizing 350,000 civilians to cross into Spanish Sahara. The Spanish government, overwhelmed by domestic instability, hastily negotiated the Madrid Accords, dividing the territory between Morocco and Mauritania. This decision ignored the Sahrawi people, whose nationalist movement, the Polisario Front, launched a war for independence. The International Court of Justice had ruled earlier that year that the Sahrawi people had the right to self-determination, rejecting Morocco's claims of historical sovereignty. Nonetheless, Morocco and Mauritania moved to occupy the territory, sparking decades of conflict. Founded in 1973, the Polisario Front emerged as a liberation movement against Spanish colonial rule. With Algeria's backing, it transitioned into a resistance force against Moroccan and Mauritanian occupation. In 1976, the Polisario proclaimed the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, recognized by over 70 nations at its peak. The SADR established its base in Algeria's Tindouf province, where thousands of Sahrawi refugees fled. These camps, plagued by harsh desert conditions and limited resources, became symbols of resilience, but also despair. The Polisario fought a guerrilla war, forcing Mauritania to withdraw in 1979. However, Morocco consolidated its hold, building the Berm, a fortified sand wall stretching 2,700 kilometers, guarded by millions of landmines. Today, Morocco controls 80% of Western Sahara, including its valuable coastal areas and phosphate mines. The remaining 20% is a buffer zone controlled by the Polisario Front. The Berm, one of the world's longest defensive barriers, separates these zones. While Morocco has developed its territories with infrastructure and settlements, the Polisario-controlled areas remain sparsely populated, serving as staging grounds for resistance. Refugee camps in Algeria house over 170,000 displaced Sahrawis. These camps lack basic amenities and represent the human toll of the conflict. Meanwhile, demographic changes within Moroccan-controlled areas complicate the prospect of a referendum, as Moroccan settlers now outnumber indigenous Sahrawis. Western Sahara's geopolitical importance transcends its barren landscapes and vast desert expanse. The region is not merely a territorial dispute, but a linchpin in North African geopolitics, global resource supply chains, and energy security. Morocco's control over Western Sahara offers access to critical natural resources, including phosphate deposits, fisheries, and potential offshore oil and gas reserves. These resources, combined with the territory's strategic location, elevate the stakes for all involved. Phosphates, essential for manufacturing fertilizers, are a cornerstone of modern agriculture. The Boukra mine in Western Sahara holds some of the richest phosphate deposits globally, contributing significantly to Morocco's standing as the second-largest phosphate producer in the world, after China. About 10% of Morocco's phosphate production originates from Western Sahara, bolstering the country's economic and geopolitical leverage. The mine's output is transported via a 100-kilometer conveyor belt, the longest in the world, stretching across the desert to the port of El Masa. This massive infrastructure underscores Morocco's deep integration of Western Sahara's resources into its economy. Should Western Sahara achieve independence, it would become a major competitor, challenging Morocco's near monopoly on global phosphate supplies. Such a scenario poses profound economic and strategic risks for Rabat. Western Sahara's coastline opens access to potentially lucrative offshore gas reserves. While exploration has been limited due to the region's disputed status, Morocco has taken steps to exploit these resources, even signing agreements with foreign firms, including Israeli companies. The discovery of vast natural gas reserves in neighboring Mauritania has fueled speculation about similar deposits in Western Sahara. Moreover, Western Sahara's location makes it a pivotal transit route for energy projects connecting sub-Saharan Africa to Europe. Morocco has proposed a $25 billion natural gas pipeline linking Nigeria to Europe, with Western Sahara serving as the critical transit zone. This project has drawn significant international attention, particularly as Europe seeks alternatives to Russian energy supplies in the wake of geopolitical tensions. Fisheries and maritime rights. The region's Atlantic coastline is rich in fisheries, providing economic sustenance and employment opportunities. Morocco has extended its exclusive economic zone, or EEZ, to encompass Western Sahara's waters, exploiting these resources to boost its economy. This move, however, has faced criticism from the Polisario Front and countries advocating for Sahrawi self-determination, as it symbolizes Morocco's unilateral exploitation of disputed territories. International involvement. The conflict in Western Sahara has drawn the attention and involvement of global powers, turning it into a proxy battleground for competing interests. The United States, Israel, and Western Europe generally back Morocco, while Algeria, Russia, and China support the Polisario Front. Morocco's Western allies? Morocco has skillfully leveraged its diplomatic ties to gain support for its claims over Western Sahara. In 2020, the United States became the first country to formally recognize Morocco's sovereignty over the region. This recognition came as part of a deal in which Morocco normalized relations with Israel, marking a significant shift in Middle Eastern and North African geopolitics. Israel followed suit, becoming the second country to recognize Morocco's claim. European nations, particularly Spain and France, have also tilted toward Morocco. Spain's shift in 2022, publicly endorsing Morocco's autonomy plan for Western Sahara, marked a dramatic policy reversal, likely influenced by economic and migration pressures. France, historically a close ally of Morocco, echoed this stance in 2024, further isolating the Polisario Front. Algeria, Western Sahara's staunchest advocate, has provided the Polisario Front with military, diplomatic, and logistical support for decades. The Tindouf refugee camps in Algeria serve as the Polisario's headquarters, underscoring the country's role as a lifeline for the Sahrawi cause. Algeria's rivalry with Morocco, fueled by ideological differences and historical grievances, adds a layer of complexity to the conflict. The arms race between Morocco and Algeria has intensified since the collapse of the 29-year ceasefire in 2020. Algeria has doubled its military budget, focusing on Russian-made equipment, while Morocco has turned to American and Israeli weaponry. This escalation risks drawing the two nations into a direct confrontation, with potentially devastating consequences for the region. The United Nations has been a key player in the Western Sahara conflict since brokering the 1991 ceasefire. The agreement included plans for a referendum to determine the territory's future, whether independence, integration with Morocco, or autonomy. However, disagreements over voter eligibility, particularly the inclusion of Moroccan settlers, have stalled the process for over 3 decades. The UN mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, or MINURSO, remains the only UN peacekeeping mission without a mandate to monitor human rights, highlighting the region's opaque and contested nature. Despite repeated resolutions, little progress has been made, leaving Western Sahara in limbo. The protracted conflict has taken a significant toll on the Sahrawi people. Forced displacement, human rights abuses, and demographic engineering have reshaped the region's social fabric. The refugee crisis. Approximately 174,000 Sahrawis live in refugee camps in Algeria, enduring harsh conditions and limited access to resources. These camps, established in the 1970s, symbolize the unresolved nature of the conflict and the human suffering it perpetuates. Generations of Sahrawis have grown up in exile, disconnected from their homeland. Demographic changes in Moroccan-controlled areas. Morocco's policies in Western Sahara have aimed to consolidate its control by encouraging Moroccan settlers to relocate to the region. Today, settlers and their descendants make up roughly 2/3 of the territory's population, outnumbering indigenous Sahrawis. This demographic shift complicates the prospect of an independence referendum, as Morocco insists that settlers should have voting rights, while the Polisario Front opposes their inclusion. Human rights concerns. Reports of human rights violations in Western Sahara, including restrictions on freedom of expression and assembly, have drawn international criticism. Activists advocating for Sahrawi independence face arrests and crackdowns, while the Moroccan government restricts access to the region for journalists and human rights organizations. The future of Western Sahara remains uncertain, with no clear resolution in sight. Several potential outcomes exist, each fraught with challenges and implications. Morocco's autonomy plan, supported by the US, Israel, and parts of Europe, proposes granting Western Sahara self-governance within Morocco. While this approach addresses Morocco's concerns over territorial integrity, it falls short of Sahrawi demands for independence and self-determination. The Polisario Front continues to advocate for an independence referendum, as endorsed by the ICJ and the UN. However, Morocco's demographic and military dominance makes this scenario increasingly unlikely without significant international intervention. A proposal to divide Western Sahara between Morocco and the Polisario Front, with the buffer zone becoming the Sahrawi state, has been floated but rejected by both sides. Partition would formalize the status quo, but might leave underlying grievances unresolved. The arms race between Morocco and Algeria, combined with renewed Polisario attacks, raises the risk of a broader regional conflict. Such an escalation could destabilize North Africa, disrupt energy supplies, and create a humanitarian crisis. Western Sahara's geography plays a central role in its political, economic, and strategic significance. This region, stretching over 266,000 square kilometers, is dominated by arid landscapes, resource-rich coasts, and a strategic position at the crossroads of Africa and Europe. Its geographic features not only define its natural wealth, but also exacerbate its complex territorial disputes. The desert landscape, a natural barrier, and a battlefield. The majority of Western Sahara is characterized by vast stretches of the Sahara Desert. Harsh and inhospitable, this terrain has shaped the lifestyles of its indigenous Sahrawi people, traditionally nomadic tribes who adapted to the desert's challenges. However, the same geography has also influenced the conflict dynamics. The Berm, a military megastructure. Morocco's construction of the Berm, a 2,700-kilometer-long fortified sand wall, was dictated by the desert's openness and the need to create defensible borders. Stretching from the northern boundary to the Mauritanian border, the berm carves the region into Moroccan-controlled and Polisario-claimed zones. The berm is not merely a defensive barrier, it symbolizes Morocco's de facto control over 80% of the territory. Its sheer scale, reinforced with millions of landmines and guarded by radar systems, demonstrates the geographic challenges of maintaining security in such a vast, featureless expanse. The buffer zone, a no-man's land. East of the berm lies the buffer zone under Polisario's nominal control. This area is largely uninhabited desert, unsuitable for agriculture or settlement, further highlighting the strategic rather than economic motivations behind territorial claims. The zone's emptiness, however, facilitates covert military movements and skirmishes. Climate and resource accessibility. Western Sahara's arid climate limits agricultural potential, but its desert serves as a repository of hidden wealth, phosphates and hydrocarbons. Morocco's control over these resources stems partly from its geographic dominance west of the berm, closer to the Atlantic coast. Coastal riches, strategic and economic potential. Western Sahara's 1,100-kilometer coastline along the Atlantic Ocean is one of its most significant geographic assets. This coastline transforms the region into a geostrategic prize and an economic hub. Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ fisheries and offshore resources. Under international maritime law, Western Sahara's EEZ extends 200 nautical miles into the Atlantic, granting access to abundant fisheries and potential offshore oil and gas deposits. The fishing grounds off Western Sahara's coast are among the richest in the world, attracting interest from European and Asian fleets. Agreements between Morocco and foreign companies to exploit these waters have sparked international criticism, as the Polisario Front argues that these deals violate Sahrawi sovereignty. Western Sahara's ports, such as El Marsa near Laayoune, serve as gateways for resource exports, particularly phosphates. These ports also hold strategic value for potential energy pipelines connecting sub-Saharan Africa to Europe. Control over these coastal hubs is critical for Morocco's ambitions to integrate Western Sahara into its economy. Western Sahara's geographic position makes it a linchpin for trade and energy routes, linking Africa, Europe, and the Atlantic world. The Trans-Saharan Corridor. Proposals for a trans-Saharan gas pipeline extending from Nigeria to Europe hinge on Western Sahara's stability. Morocco's geographic control positions it as a key player in facilitating or obstructing such projects. This enhances Morocco's leverage over European energy markets, especially as the EU seeks alternatives to Russian supplies. Western Sahara's location, nestled between Morocco, Algeria, and Mauritania, places it at the heart of North African geopolitics. For Algeria, its eastern neighbor, supporting the Polisario Front, serves as a counterbalance to Morocco's regional dominance. Meanwhile, Mauritania's southern border with Western Sahara is vital for maintaining its neutrality and avoiding entanglement in the conflict. Western Sahara's unique geographic, political, and economic characteristics have led to remarkable and often overlooked facts that underscore its global significance. Stretching over 100 kilometers from the Bou Craa phosphate mine to the Atlantic coast, this conveyor belt is visible from space. Its construction underscores Morocco's reliance on Western Sahara's resources and its integration into global supply chains. One of the world's most mine-infested regions. The berm's millions of landmines make Western Sahara one of the most dangerous territories for civilians. The United Nations has identified demining as a critical issue, yet progress remains slow due to the ongoing conflict. A desert visible from space. The stark contrast between the sand dunes, the conveyor belt, and the Atlantic coast creates a landscape so distinct that it is often noted in satellite imagery. Western Sahara's visibility from orbit highlights the human impact on an otherwise desolate terrain. Africa's last colony. Western Sahara is often referred to as Africa's final remaining colony, emphasizing the incomplete process of decolonization. Despite decades of international diplomacy, the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination remains unfulfilled. The Sahrawi refugees, generations in exile. The refugee camps in Algeria are among the world's oldest continuous settlements of displaced people. For nearly 5 decades, these camps have represented a state in exile, with schools, hospitals, and governance structures mimicking a sovereign nation. The Polisario Front, an unyielding resistance. Despite limited resources and increasing isolation, the Polisario Front has sustained its struggle for independence since 1973. Its resilience reflects the deep-rooted determination of the Sahrawi people to reclaim their homeland. Geopolitical chessboard. Western Sahara's conflict serves as a microcosm of broader global rivalries. From US-Israel alliances to Russia-China-Algeria cooperation, the region's fate is intertwined with shifting power dynamics. Conclusion: a region shaped by geography and conflict. Western Sahara is more than a blank space on the map. It is a territory shaped by its geography, natural wealth, and the aspirations of its people. The interplay of desert landscapes, resource-rich coasts, and strategic positioning has made it a focal point for regional and global powers. Yet, at its heart lies the Sahrawi people's enduring struggle for recognition and autonomy. The future of Western Sahara remains uncertain. Whether through autonomy, independence, or continued Moroccan control, the resolution of this conflict will depend on balancing the geographic and economic stakes with the human aspirations for justice and sovereignty. As the world's attention shifts elsewhere, Western Sahara endures as a testament to the complexities of geopolitics and the resilience of a people fighting for their place on the map.